Immediately after returning to the Tychon sortie, on the Red Owl Bale explained that the sword Jean obtained had the property of non-disappearing. It doesn't go away? Yes, of course I thought you knew, but it seems like you don't know anything at all. This is a sword that was completed while dealing with you for a few days. As soon as I unleashed that fire, I felt like I could easily subdue you. Jean had not yet been able to name the new magic sword. Although he has added his name to secret techniques or decisive battles that were taught to him by someone else, this is the first sword he has created independently. So giving it a name felt awkward. I felt even more embarrassed when I gave myself a grandiose and fancy name like Runkendal's Decisive Battle BG or Sarah's Flame of the Sky Sword Fighter. Once the fire you have catches on a target, it cannot go out. It probably won't go away even if you die. Okay? How do you know something I don't know? Because I have a godhead, I possess transcendent insight. After what happened to you, I kept thinking about what that spark was. Maybe if you had cut me that day, I would never have been able to put out the fire on my own. The power of the veil is the power of the sun god. And according to Orgel's explanation, the sun god is clearly a being of a much higher rank than other gods known in this world. If the veil could not extinguish Jin's fire, there was a high possibility that those who used lower levels of deity would also have no choice. Of course, the power of the sun god that Veil possessed was only a small portion, but with that alone Veil had a status that surpassed that of most middle to low level gods. It's interesting, but I don't really believe it. I also can't believe the fact that you created such a fire. That's the territory Sarah was trying to reach. You're her successor, so I don't feel too bad. If Sarah were there, I'm sure she would have liked it. Cut me down with that fire. Suddenly? I said I couldn't believe it. And you must know the effects of fire so that you can use it well when avenging Sarah in the future. Veil released his power and extended one arm to Jean, as if telling me to go ahead and cut it down. I'm a little reluctant. If the fire doesn't go out like you said, Sarah reached the desired area but you can't control your fire? That can't happen, so cut it quickly. Just make a very light scratch. Soon Jean set fire to Bradamante and slightly cut Bale's forearm. It's so light that even an ordinary person doesn't need to apply ointment. Oh, it's so stinging and hot. Bale pulled out his cut arm and frowned. Soon Jean realized that what Bale said was true. The veil really can't erase the fire left in the wound. To show Jean, Veil continued to generate a lot of golden energy in his other hand and pressed his injured arm as if to stop the bleeding. However, the small fire left in the wound showed no sign of going out. No matter how much I covered and rubbed it with the power, the vague image of fire remained. Did you see it? Even someone as big as me can't erase this. So the same goes for that guy named Orgel. The power of the sun god he had didn't seem to be of a higher level than what I had. Unless something like your phoenix or the god of fire comes forward, there is nothing you can do. Are you here, Jean? While the two were talking, Hito and Yuria entered the sortie site. Yes, Lord Hito. Jean unconsciously looked at Hito and Yuria alternately. It feels somewhat awkward to see Hito standing with Yuria instead of Sandra. But strangely, Yuria's expression did not look good. How are you, Yuria? Yes. Jean Appa. Why are you so listless? What's wrong? As a contractor at AZ Mill, her colleagues have been making special efforts to support her mental health due to the things she has had to endure since childhood and the many tragedies she has experienced indirectly. Thanks to this, Yuria was always cheerful and cheerful. She was also perceptive as a princess and was loved by everyone in the Tychon Kingdom. No, there's nothing in particular, but I feel like I'm strangely sinking. So Uncle Hito is trying to make me feel better. Did you know? After all, there is the power of truth. When Hito spoke as if he was embarrassed, Yuria smiled. Thanks for your thought, Uncle. Thanks to you and seeing Jean come back safely, I feel a little relieved. Yuria guessed that the reason her mind suddenly became dizzy was because of Jin's personal situation. There was an ominous feeling from the moment he headed to Kingelo's new headquarters. I'm glad it helped. But why does Bale keep twisting his body? Where does it hurt? That's because you guys showed up and he didn't turn off the lights. Fire. Jean explained the whole story and retrieved the fire left in Bale's wound. As Veil expected, once Jin's will was conveyed, the fire was extinguished very easily. I was aware that you crossed the wall that day. I can't believe the newly acquired sword has that kind of power. Try it on me too. Jean gave Hito the same scratch. He also repeatedly rubbed the small faint fire on the affected area with his iron-like hand, but it did not go out. Oh, it really doesn't go off. At this level, it is not painful enough to make a fuss like the veil, but if it is cut properly there will be no answer. Do you think it would be difficult to withstand a deep cut? Well, I won't know until I experience it. It will be incredibly painful, like burn patients who do not receive treatment in time. Did you give this sword a name? Not yet. What about eternalization? Eternalization. Yes, a fire that never goes out. Everyone who has dealt with you, including me, has probably felt that way. You are like a fire that never goes out. The effect of the actual sword is the same, so I think it matches well. It's so grandiose that it's embarrassing. For some reason Jean was reminded of the moment when Cosmos gave him the nickname Black Prince and his skin grew. That's the way it is when naming Biggie. All the secret techniques you learned would have been named that way. I think it's a fitting name if you don't mind. In this way Biji's name became eternal. Hito, as a fellow warrior, was satisfied with the fact that he had given Jin's sword a name, so he took out Sanjayan, but when he remembered that Yuria was still by his side he put it back. Did you get any harvest from your meeting with Kinjalo? Let me go to the conference room and explain it to you step by step. While going to the conference room, Jean carefully looked at Yuria. His expression seemed to have improved a little, but his mood was still more subdued than usual. Asmil's power shouldn't be hinting at some dark future for Yuria. When I arrived at the conference room, all my colleagues gathered in an instant. For a while Jean relayed to them in detail all the information he had learned from Orgel. About the roles assumed to be played by the Sun God, the Demon King Zito, and Joshua. Most of the colleagues who heard the story felt the same way as Jean. Even though it is already overwhelming, my worries are deepening. Wow, I feel frustrated once again at the thought that even if I get rid of the evil spirit, it's not the end. But what can you do? Anyway, even with temporary alliances, we had to come to an agreement after the evil spirit. Casimir was the first to open his mouth. If we cannot handle them, all the world will eventually no longer be the place we knew. Either it changes through the purification advocated by Kinjalo, or it becomes hell by the descending demon king, or Jipal becomes the sole god and manipulates history as he wishes, or the evil god destroys it. So we must keep doing what we are doing no matter how difficult it is. Although he was saying something that everyone knew, somehow I felt the majesty of the king of Taiken from Casimir. He was developing the charisma of a king. It is as Sir Casimir said. Just like we have done so far, we just need to resolve the issue step by step. So first of all, we should put aside issues like the Sun God and the Demon Lord and focus on Rosa. Yes, my lord. As you all know, Rosa is currently growing stronger faster than Orgel expected, and the presumed reason for this is the despair generated by Joshua. Orgel has decided to take charge of this guy and check this fact, so we will work together to eliminate him as soon as we receive a call. And Jean carefully made eye contact with his colleagues. I think it would be best to expedite the final battle with Rosa as much as possible. It's not just Joshua's despair that strengthens Rosa. Chaos is spreading throughout the world and encroaching on ordinary humans. The Bamul Alliance and the Temporary Alliance are going on missions to contaminated areas around the world to suppress it as much as possible, but there are limits. In particular, the Huefest area was so severely eroded that even they could not do anything about it, so it was no exaggeration to say that half of the world was already in despair. Of course, the longer the fight is delayed, the more despair will be created. It's a hunch, but I think Rosa sees the moment when she thinks we're fully prepared as the right time. The despair will be maximized if we are defeated at that time. Jean couldn't understand Rosa, who only stayed in the Garden of Swords, even though she had that much power, if it weren't for that reason. Of course, I don't mean to hit it very fast. However, Rosa must find an unexpected moment. We must not despair more than Rosa wants, and we must aim for the times when Rosa is not completed because of that. It's a somewhat abstract story, but it was difficult to understand that Rosa used despair in the first place. Jean and his colleagues had to make difficult inferences like this every time and could not be sure of the results. This means dealing with a being that is not a human being but an evil spirit. Starting today, we will work with temporary allies to confirm at least some of these expectations. Once the relationship between the speed at which Rosa is completed and despair is confirmed at least roughly, we will set a date for the decisive battle. The moment Jean said that, a member of the Seven Colors urgently came to the conference room. Your Majesty, the King, Sir Jean. Lord Mary has just returned. Hurry and guide me. Mary had recently gone on a rescue mission for survivors in Huffister along with the Tawna brothers. She had just returned from rescuing some survivors and her entire body was covered in wounds. As soon as she saw Jean, she closed her eyes tightly as if in pain. This was because I entered Huffister and encountered Defuse, the first-class Deacon Petro and other deacons from Runkendal, about 30 Cologne natives, and Pecan Minch's contractor Vin Branch. The knights led by Mary successfully infiltrated Huffister and rescued about 100 survivors. There was no problem until we confirmed that our troops, who were originally thought to be in the eldest sister's territory, had taken refuge in western Delki and infiltrated there again. Even though chaotic knights and monsters kept attacking us, we were strangely lucky. Before we could begin our search in earnest, the deacons who remained in the estate informed us of the situation, and not only Rosa but also powerful enemies such as the Knights of the Mausoleum did not appear. Daytona and Haytona said. The two of them and Jean were sitting in front of the recovery room where Jonah and Mary were looking confused. Things went smoothly even after we arrived in Delki. Prince Laika, a completely unexpected person, was hiding the survivors well. However, after taking over the rescue targets, the Cosmos ship was escaping to the waiting sea. I saw Brother Deepoo's Runkendal. When he attacked Mary and the knights at the end, he looked completely engulfed in chaos. Like Rosa, horns sprouted from her head. What happens to Brother Dyfus and the knights now? Everyone will be locked up in the dungeon. As for the fourth horseman, Rosa has been coveting it for a while. There is a high possibility that it will be Rosa's person. By chaos, the story Mary heard from Lynn Milano ended up being true. As soon as second brother appeared, we thought the operation was bound to fail. Just releasing energy was enough to shake the Cosmos fleet. Even if all of us fought against him, I felt like we couldn't help him. As soon as Mary saw Deepoo's, she approached him like a man in a trance. Oni-sama. Right? Brother Deepoo's. It's me, Mary. I don't know? Sister Mary, you can't go. Stop. Even after facing the transformed Deepoo's, Mary seemed to have no intention of fighting him. Deepoo's also did not swing his sword at Mary. Rather, he smiled with satisfaction and slowly waited for Mary to approach. Yes, Mary. Where you should be is next to me, not Tychon. Come on, let me help you. As always. Deepoo's even welcomed Mary by saying that. But fortunately, Mary did not lose her mind when she saw Deepoo's. My sister immediately realized that there was no answer to confronting my brother head-on, so she showed her wit. If you hadn't pretended to break down at that time, none of us would have been able to come back. Deepoo's had not forgotten his past relationship with Mary. Therefore, in his eyes, Mary's actions seemed reasonable. So to speak, I let my guard down. As soon as Mary got close to Dyfus, she calmly unleashed her light speed thrust, opened the volcano, and entered into battle. Deepoo's lost half of his body right from the start. Mary used her sword skills more ruthlessly than ever before, and only then did the Tawna brothers and the knights realize her intentions and hasten to prepare for escape. The battle did not last very long. The soul energy quickly recovered Deepoo's body, which had lost more than half of it. Intuitively, Mary was certain that as soon as he recovered completely, there would be no more. So while Dyfus was recovering, she did her best to escape to the fleet, but it was inevitable that she would receive several attacks from Dyfus just before arriving. That was why Mary was in the healing room now. I'm so worried about my youngest sister. I wasn't talking about physical injuries. Mind. It was clearly an act when Mary used her wits to push Dyfus even for a moment, but even her painful feelings could not have been fake. Was it because of Brother Deepoo's that Yuria was not in good condition? Since Sister Mary's belongings have increased in Tychon, the power of truth may have made her foreshadow such a bad future. I don't know what to say to Sister Mary. While Jean was silently patting his brothers on the shoulders, there was a stir inside the healing room. Worry? I'm more worried about you guys who are sitting around getting comforted by Jean Tana bastards. Sister Mary. Sister, are you awake? The Tana brothers' eyes were red as they stood up and looked at Mary. Mary clicked her tongue at that sight. I've been awake since a while ago. However, I was so tired that I tried to hug Joanna and get some rest, but I kept hearing voices. I came out because I felt like it was my duty to beat you too if you tried to make a fool of yourself. I'm sorry, sister. But I didn't cry. Of course, if you hit me, I will hit you sweetly. I'm proud of you, you pathetic bastards. Jean is your younger brother. I understand that his strength and skills are lower than that of his younger brother. But I have to make an effort to look like my older brothers. How long are you going to just rely on Jean? It means having a little bit of a strong foundation. After shooting the Tana brothers, Mary made eye contact with Jean. Don't make that shit-chewing face either. If the boss shows signs of worry, the subordinates will feel even more frustrated. Yes, sister. I will listen carefully. It's not that we couldn't save the people and the fact that Brother Deepu's ended up like that. It's a mess, but it's not an entirely unexpected problem. Anyone who knows the relationship between Deepu's and Mary will know this. The fact that Mary is trying to force herself to pretend to be okay right now. Jean had respect for Mary. I will never show my weak side again, and I will never lose my cool even if the day comes when I face Dyfus engulfed in chaos. Since coming to Tychon, she has kept every word she said. It was rather an insult to offer such clumsy consolation to Mary. So what we need to worry about now is the safety of the remaining survivors and Brother Deepu's intentions. If this is Brother Deepu's intention, no matter how much I think about it, Brother Deepu's let us go on purpose. Cosmos ships are amazing, but if my brother had made up his mind to pursue them, he could have easily caught them. Hot sister. In that case, Brother Deepu's regained his senses for a moment. Is that it? Hey Tana. Such an assumption should be completely ruled out in the first place. Brother is no longer the person we knew. I have crossed the river of no return. The fact that Mary excludes even the slightest hope for Deepu's is no different. She was certain that the moment she had hope for Deepu's, Rosa would take advantage of it in some way. Or the corrupted Dyfus himself uses it. The best choice she could make for Deepu's was to end Rosa and the Garden of Swords as soon as possible. Even if you have to cut Dyfus in the process. Anyway, why on earth did you let us go? Even when I was lying down, I kept thinking about it. For some reason, I feel like it might be because of despair. Valeria wrote down the information her colleagues had discovered during Mary's absence in a notebook and left it in her healing room, where Mary looked through it all. The reason Rosa uses Joshua is also presumed to be to create despair? Wouldn't the same be true for Brother Deepu's? Instead, unlike Joshua, my brother's role is to maximize the despair of others rather than falling into despair himself. Brother Deepu's decided that letting go and then capturing again would be more effective in creating despair than exterminating my sister and the rescued people in Delki. Is this what you mean? Yes, because failure is always greater after success. Or maybe he wasn't satisfied with the despair he got from killing us in Delki. As I said just now, my brother didn't find reason in the chaos for a moment because of me. It's not like they let us go just on a whim. There is definitely a reason, and it is definitely related to Rosa's completion. The only things that complete Rosa are time and despair. Jean had a feeling that Mary's hunch might be right. Then Brother Deepu's will lure us again. When a hunter releases his prey, it is usually when he is trying to lure out a larger game by using him as bait. Yeah, I guess so. We need to prepare well or attack first. But it's difficult to judge. There are too many options for you to prepare, and it's too risky to move first. First of all, I will also convey information about Brother Deepu's to Kinjalo and Zippel. Orgel is currently looking for Joshua, so I think we need to check the location of Brother Deepu's in the process. Defuse was the same as Joshua. Rosa will continue to build despair through them unless she can somehow find them and completely eliminate them. However, unlike Joshua, Deepu's death inevitably leads to despair for Jean and Mary. Even so, Mary believes that eliminating Deepu's is the only thing that can be done for him, but Jean wanted to find another way. Maybe Rosa wants us to kill Brother Deepuz. Moreover, my brother has a deformed body, so it is impossible to treat him with the current purifier. The best thing to do is to subdue Dyphus and then seal it away until a means to purify it can be found. As if Runtia was left in subspace for now. Just as he was thinking about that, Jean saw Casimir and Jet approaching from beyond. Casimir had just come to see Jean after receiving the report from Jet. Lord Casimir. Confucius, Jean, I just received an unfavorable message from Zippel. Are you really talking about breaking up the temporary alliance? No, rather I requested support as a temporary ally. They said the Luthero Magic Federation was attacked and the attacker was Lord Dyphus. Brothers Jean-Marie and Tana gritted their teeth reflexively. Dyphus has already begun to move. How much damage do you say there is? It's serious. It is said that the capital of the Milken Kingdom disappeared without a trace and the civilian death toll is estimated at over 200,000. The moment Jean heard the number 200,000, he thought his ears were wrong. Did you say 200,000? If that is true, Deepuz has already committed an irreversible massacre of civilians. Brother Tana, who was listening, also gritted his teeth and Mary's face turned pale. Her two fists were shaking as she barely suppressed her emotions. Even if Deepuz escapes the encroachment of chaos in the future, such a huge tragedy cannot be forgotten. That drove the brothers crazy. There are at least 10,000 people taken hostage. As Casimir continued his explanation with a sad face, Jean was overcome by the sensation of his whole body being submerged in water. Rosa! This crazy monster! A huge disaster occurred. And that too by the brother who inevitably became Rosa's weapon of war. Jin's eyes were shaking as he looked at Casimir. If there are 10,000 hostages, have the Chaos Dragons and Black Ships of the evil god moved? Yes, they are said to have simultaneously attacked the Luthero Magic Federation under the command of Lord Dyphus. In the process, the evil spirit's ability and tunnels, which are believed to be teleportation or summoning in the form of a giant portal, were used. The Luthero Magic Federation failed to respond properly. The hundreds of black ships and thousands of chaos dragons that suddenly pop out of tunnels and portals cannot be dealt with quickly unless they are from the Draka main base. In addition, Deepuz carried out a diversionary operation. At first it appeared with a fleet around Draka, as if it had begun a full-scale invasion, but while Ziffel was hastily gathering its troops, it disappeared like smoke and stirred up all parts of the Federation. The Chaos Army led by Dyphus inflicted significant damage to Zippel in just 1 hour and succeeded in escaping. Draka's forces could not keep up with the mobility of the Chaos Army. Additionally, Deepuz's inaction was also a problem. During the chase, Octavia and the Revenants were never able to break through the soul energy he gave off. The world's best company suffered without even using its hands properly. The affected areas of the Federation, including the Milken Kingdom, are currently in a state of complete chaos. The spirit left behind by Deepuz was like a wildfire that grew out of control, causing suffering to the remaining civilians. If the death toll exceeds 200,000, it means that the number of injured is much higher. Even Songguk, who had been blocking all communication with Zippel, began dispatching healers as soon as he heard the news. The fear was spreading insanely fast. Since Jeep's territory, which was considered the safest fence no matter what kind of monster appears in the world, has suffered so helplessly, many people say that it is only a matter of time before the end is caused by the evil spirit. While Casimir was explaining these things, Jean took a deep breath. What he needed to do was not to wallow in grief, but to stop Dyphus as soon as possible from now on. I had to understand the situation accurately. I must go to Draka immediately. There may be an attack by an evil spirit while I am away, so please activate all defensive equipment. Since it was revealed that Rosa had abilities such as large-scale teleportation, the battle could now suddenly break out at any time. There will be no limitations to abilities such as large-scale summoning and teleportation. It would be using humans or despair. Is the reason for kidnapping a hostage to compensate for him? The fear experienced by those who were already under the direct rule of evil spirits, and the fear suddenly felt by those who lived in lands they thought were safe. The level of despair resulting from it would clearly be different. It is not immediately clear whether Rosa has sufficient power to move troops. I understand, Confucius. And where is Cirrus? You just returned from the Holy Kingdom. I think it would be better for you to visit Kinsalo yourself with the help of Cirrus. Also take a look at the Empire. It is possible that those places were also attacked. I will. Jean and Casimir turned and walked away, and Mary looked behind them and then turned back towards the healing room, overcoming a feeling that feels like it's about to break down. There will be a big fight soon. If you want to fight properly, you need to focus on recovery, so prepare the knights of your family. Yes, sister. Even while Jean was on his way to the Red Owl's sortie range, reports from the Seven Colors were coming in non-stop. Damage situation updated in real time. There was no sense of reality at all in the deaths of people who only appeared in enormous numbers. Suddenly Jean stopped walking. It was in front of Uria's room. A muffled cry could be heard beyond the closed door. As a contractor at Asmil, she had already had an ominous feeling about this situation. Perhaps Uriah may have already learned the outcome of this situation. Jean patted her door a few times as if to comfort her and then headed back to the launch site. No matter what outcome she saw, she definitely wanted to create a better future. Red Owl was unable to set the coordinates of Jeep's headquarters. Jean fell into a forest on the outskirts of Draka, and as soon as he arrived, he was able to meet Ronald Ziffel. He seemed to have known that the Red Owl would arrive here. Are you here, Sir Jean? Jean didn't ask how he knew in advance and waited. Not only was it not the situation to find out, but the important problem now was Deepu's. Lord Ronald. Thank you for coming immediately. I will take care of you. The municipality where the camp fell was the area attacked by Deepu's. As it was near the main base, the damage was not very severe, but the entire city was filled with fear. Because the disaster that occurred in Milkoon and other federations was not something that could be covered up by controlling the media. While we were requesting assistance from Tychon, there was another attack. Ronald said as he boarded Zippel's fourth flagship Anion. Is it possible that there was another large-scale troop movement in the meantime? No. Deepu's Runkendal attacked the Barkel Burrow accompanied by 2 Black Knights. Because preparations were made, civilian casualties were not very large. But the Ghost Captain was seriously injured. Mr. Cadden also responded with a body that had not fully recovered and suffered internal injuries. Brother Deepu's. As Jean was about to start talking, he looked outside through the ship's window. Now this land is full of people he killed or hurt. What happened to the 4 horsemen? Like the first attack, they escaped without suffering any damage. It seemed like he received a lot of power from the evil spirit. According to Ronald Dyfus, not only had the ability to travel between dimensions and the Prophet's Tunnel through the power of the evil spirit, but also had the ability to fly like Vale. So they are repeatedly hitting and running with their overwhelming mobility. The alter ego of a vicious body. Jeep defined him that way. Dyfus had a power that could not be understood without having received some of the power of the evil spirit. Anion arrived at Ziffel's home. Zippel's fortress, known as the headquarters of magic, was completely open and crowded with civilians unlike usual. They were accepting terrified civilians. When the camp descended from Anion, they pointed their fingers and bowed their heads as if a savior had come. The former was due to the fact that Jean was a Runkendal like the evil spirit Dyfus, and the latter was due to his actions. Just as Ronald was about to give orders to clear out the people who were pointing fingers, Jean stopped him. It would be best to leave it alone. Jean passed them and entered the main house. Regardless of whether it was outside or inside, Zippel's subordinates were seen running non-stop. The only people who did not run were those who appeared to be the highest-ranking elders. Even when they saw Jean rushing in, they were not as polite as Ronald. On the contrary, there were many who frowned in disapproval or showed outright hostility. Of course, Jean did not notice the old minnow's complaints due to the situation, but the elders were naturally following Jean and Ronald, as if they too needed to hear Jin's story with the top decision-maker soon. After passing through 2 corridors, I arrived at the office of the head of Jeep. Originally, where Kiliak should have been, there was Baradin. We meet again like this, Jean. Baradin. Despite the fact that numerous civilians under Jeep's protection were killed, Octavia and Cadden were injured again, and there were serious troop losses. There was no sign of sadness in Baradin at all. He frowned as if he was more annoyed by the elders who followed Jean than by the tragedy that Jipal experienced. What have you come to do, elders? What do you mean, Sagaju? Of course I want to attend the meeting. If you are incompetent, you have to be smart and busy. Well, you took the steps, so if you're curious, listen and go. It won't take long. The elders frowned. However, they did not rashly refute Baradin's words. You looked disorganized. Looking at your relaxed attitude, I don't think that's really the case. I just heard that the fourth horseman hit Barkel Burrow. But is there any reason to be carefree? I heard about 100 civilians were killed. Although the Wraith Captain and Cadden were injured, the four horsemen did not take any damage after fighting them. In that case, it would have been okay if they had devastated Barkel and entered Draka, but if they stopped, there must have been a reason. Then why did you request urgent support from the Bamul coalition? Is it for post-mortem recovery? Baradin smiled at those words. That question is a little strange. It's a temporary alliance, so isn't it natural? Above all, we must prevent the despair that the evil spirit gains from growing. So we must rescue the hostages. As soon as the second and fourth horsemen begin their activities, the despair at being attributed to evil spirits is rapidly increasing. When Baradin spoke about despair, Jin's eyes widened. Zippel was already finding out the extent of the despair that Rosa was harvesting. Suddenly Baradin waved his hand and a green window appeared in the air. The green spear had a form very similar to that of recording magic. It is the same feeling of energy seen in the land where the residual energy of the sun god is, which Zippel calls a holy land. Jean recognized that it was the reward for rescuing Valeria from the Holy Land. Recording magic? I must have encountered the original often, so wouldn't it be embarrassing for me to show such surprise after seeing the imitation? However, the elders who followed him into the office seemed more surprised than Jean. So Sagaju, have you finally obtained that magic? Why didn't you tell us about this unfortunate event? The elders' greedy eyes were shining, as if they did not care about the tragedy that the Federation was going through. Baradin kept smiling, and Jean read the darkness in that smile, and intuitively knew what was going to happen next. It was a purge. Why didn't you tell me, elders? Because old and useless people don't need to know. What kind of town is that? Sagaju Kiak Soga whoop whoop. The elders who were about to answer suddenly grabbed their necks and twisted their bodies. It was because I suddenly couldn't breathe. What looked like letters were being engraved on Baradin's green window. I just thought about the hard work I've put in and showed it along the way. How about it? It didn't take that long, like I said, right? Ronald stood calmly as usual, as if he knew something like this would happen, and Baradin looked down at the fallen elders foaming at the mouth. Among them, one of the elders was seen resisting Baradin's magic by exhaling once in a while. With bloodshot eyes, he managed to get up and stretched out his hand towards Baradin. A deformed fireball came out from his hand, and Baradin lightly slashed it with his sword. As the fireball dispersed, bloody tears flowed from the elder's eyes. "Oh, you will be saved." Those were the last words heard from the elder, who was the only one who resisted the magic even for a moment. As he fell forward, there were no living elders left in the office. Jean was feeling goosebumps all over his body. It was not because of the magic that was close to the power that Baradin showed, or because of the swordsmanship that was difficult to find flaws in. It was because I realized once again that my friend had changed. Friends and brothers. Everyone had turned into monsters. Originally I was planning to deal with it after you left, but this isn't that bad. Anyway, how much did we talk about? It said that we were confirming the extent of despair. Take a look at this. Baradin's green window spread wide enough to fill the office. There was a map of the world drawn in it, and all the places were full of black blotches. In particular, Huffister was so dark that it was difficult to find transparent parts, and the rest of the continent was full of spots that were lighter or the same. The black areas shown on this map are the despair being harvested by evil spirits. Right now the chest is about 50% complete. What is the basis for the estimate of 50%? The speed at which the ship ram is formed. Every time the black spots increase, there is a change in appearance. Orgel went before you, and he put the perfection of ram and evil spirits on the same line. Baradin pointed to Draka, the autonomous districts and spots in the kingdom of Milken. These spots were formed at the same time that the Federation was attacked by Deepu's Runkendal, and the civilians of the Milken Kingdom were massacred and taken hostage. Still getting thicker and bigger. This is probably because the faith of civilians who thought that the Federation would be safe, especially Draka, where our headquarters is located, was broken. As he said, the procrastination spot there was growing little by little but without stopping. It was certainly small compared to the entire Huffister, but it was also very large compared to other places. Jin's gaze, which was quietly examining the spot, landed on the Taiken Kingdom. The Taiken also had black spots. Although it was literally just a dot in size, it was particularly dark and stood out. Sister Mary? Or is it Uria's despair? Two people immediately came to mind. I have also heard about the relationship between the 7th and 4th horsemen. Moreover, Asmil's contractors may also be distressed by the prospect of some terrible future. Baradin said, conscious of Jin's gaze. Jin didn't answer but looked at another spot. Among the spots on the Hufester side, there was one land that was changing the most actively. Rickalton. A land where a prophet in the past gathered human sacrifices. In the past, Jin had asked the Black Knight Docs to investigate the place. Dogs has not been able to contact me since then. It seems like you noticed it too as you were watching Rickalton closely. We are confident that the 4th horseman is transporting all the hostages there. Rickalton is the place where despair has been most actively growing since the Federation was attacked. Then what had to be done was clear. Defeat Rickalton and rescue the hostages. Small-scale operations like before were not suitable. There was no way that all of the more than 10,000 hostages would be alive, but the situation was so bad that even if only 1,000 of them were to be rescued, a fleet was absolutely necessary. Don't you feel like it's absurd for humans to fight with God? If there was no element of despair, there would be no reason for the world's best forces to step forward to save the civilians in this situation. What? This means that it would be horribly inefficient if the opponent were human. What if you who are immune to chaos get hurt while trying to save civilians? What if there is irreparable loss to other top-of-the-line power sources? It shouldn't happen. Jin felt like he was listening to Rosa from her human days, not Baradin. Now, in Baradin's world, ordinary people seem to be meaningless beings. Let's stop talking nonsense. It's not a good story to hear. Anyway, if you've been to Orgel, you'll be aware of this situation. All we have to decide is the date to attack Rickalton and the troops to mobilize. Okay, I think we'd better move as quickly as possible. There will definitely be limitations to the mobility of the 4 horsemen and the Chaos troops, but that cannot be estimated at all. Is it the same for Hister? In the first place, Valeria's current recording magic could not have been used to create the map that Baradin has now created. Jin nodded and Baradin shrugged his shoulders. It's a shame. I can't believe I can only handle the original to that extent. If you're going to use it that way, it would be better to hand it over to us. You're talking nonsense again. I agree that the operation must begin quickly, before the 4th horseman attacks somewhere again. The moment Jin said that, suddenly a new spot appeared to be forming on the map. Baradin was also shocked and looked at the map. It was in the Empire that new spots of despair formed. Among them, it was the land that Dante personally protected. Due to time, not only Dante but also his colleagues, including Cyrus and Casimir, could be present in the imperial capital. As you say, it moves scary. It may not be the 4th horseman. I have to go right away. Let's talk about the rest after we get back. When Jin turned around and tried to leave, Baradin followed him. I will go with you. Jin looked at Baradin for a moment and then nodded. Imperial capital. The pursuit team should be disbanded as of this time to take care of the safety of the people. The head of the family has given orders. Yes. At the shout of a commander, the knights lined up and stopped. All around them were full of ghosts and dead bodies. There were some knights, but most of them were civilians. The knights dispersed and began to take care of the fallen people everywhere. Civilians were trapped in each collapsed building. About 30 minutes ago, a black portal suddenly opened in the middle of the capital. The chaos dragons and black ships that poured in instantly turned the area into hell, and Dante began responding almost immediately. Among the misfortunes, fortunately Casimir and Cyrus had just arrived. If we hadn't been able to ride Mott, no matter how quickly we reacted, we would have suffered greater damage than we do now. It took only 15 minutes for Dante to arrive on the scene and eliminate more than 80% of the Chaos Dragons and Black Ships. Nevertheless, it was literally unavoidable that thousands of casualties occurred in the meantime. Now Dante was chasing the enemy commander who was fleeing, ordering the pursuit team and garrison to rescue the people and the Knights of the Family, including the Dragoons, to wipe out the remnants. "I will definitely find you and tear you to death." Dante's angry eyes scanned the front without stopping. The guy had already escaped to the outskirts of the capital, but he continued to form portals to escape, but was caught by Dante and failed. Because Mort was exhausted, he could no longer use teleportation, so the moment he lost sight of him, even once it was over. But Dante was not the kind of person who would miss that guy just because he was impatient. Moreover, this place was the center of the land he was protecting. Swak dash. As Rashid radiated brilliance, part of the forest on the outskirts was cut off like a puzzle piece. Dante fired a new sword energy in all directions of the cut forest, intercepting the commander who was inside. The guy tried to forcibly pierce Dante's sword, but fell forward in a disgusting manner, and Dante did not miss the moment. "You son of a bitch!" When he hit the helmet with the hilt of the sword, the face revealed was none other than Joshua Runkendall. "Was it you, Joshua Runkendall?" Joshua looked even more withdrawn than the last time he was attacked by Bale. His eyes were shaking unsteadily and cold sweat was constantly flowing from his pale face. "Go and strike the Empire. This was originally supposed to be done by the Fourth Horseman, but I did not inform him for you. If you successfully end the terrorist attack on behalf of the Fourth Horseman and return without the help of me or the head of the family, he will definitely give you one more chance." Before hitting Empire, Joshua heard those words from Melina. However, now that he has been caught, he cannot return without help, and the terrorist attack has not lived up to the Prophet's expectations at all. This time too Joshua failed. What's more, it's making Joshua more despairing. It was true that another dimension unrelated to Dante was forming in the distant sky behind Dante's face. In it, Dyphus' army was seen leaving. Just like that, Joshua's despair was growing for Rosa once more. Dante turned his head and his face became contemplative and distorted. Dyphus' army came out of the portal and was instantly turning the ground into chaos. Even though the entire capital was already in an emergency defense state due to Joshua's invasion, it was not enough to immediately block the Chaos Dragon and Black Ship fleet that appeared out of nowhere. Damn, Joshua was just bait. Bait for Dyphus' army. Already thousands of people and the knights who were trying to protect them were injured or killed trying to catch that mere bait. Although they have just defeated Joshua, an even larger army is invading the Empire again. Even from such a great distance, the power of Dyphus, who commanded the new army of chaos, was clearly visible. A force incomparably stronger than that of Joshua shook the entire sky and earth. Pooh! Ha ha ha! Joshua burst out in empty laughter. It was a self-deprecating laugh born of a sense of failure, but it didn't sound like that to Dante. It was like hearing the scathing laughter of an enemy who had succeeded in an operation. Suddenly, Rashid's blade slit Joshua's throat. Even when Joshua's head fell, he didn't stop laughing with black tears streaming from his eyes. "It's a defeat. We had to prepare for further attacks." For Dante, it was an inevitable result because the lives of the people were his top priority. He hunts down the invading enemies by slaughtering them alone and puts all the rest into rescuing the people. Realistically, that was also the best. Currently, Dante is the only person in the Empire who can fight the army of chaos alone and engage in both ground and air warfare. I felt like my head was going to explode. Even if Joshua was cut into 6 pieces before leaving, it didn't seem like he would die. There was a high possibility that he would recover during his absence and go on a rampage again, join the enemy, or run away. But first we have to abandon this guy and go over there. The moment I made a decision, Dante was able to confirm that a familiar energy was spreading from the direction where Deepu's army appeared. Jin, Noigi and Reiki. It was Jin's energy. Dante also saw flame properties and green-colored magic that he had never seen before, which were Baradin's power. The 2 people who arrived just in time joined the battlefield. Jean and Baradin were trying to meet Dante first, but when they saw a portal opened in the sky they immediately read the situation. Ka-ha-ha, ka-ha-ha-ha. Joshua still couldn't stop laughing until he was trampled by Dante and his head was crushed. The shattered heads gathered in the air in a bizarre shape and continued to recover. What's so funny, trash? The real Runkendal who dares not look at anyone like you has come here. I understand if you're doing it, because you find yourself funny. While Dante began dealing with Joshua again, Baradin was deploying an area-wide shield. It was a protective shield large enough to cover one section of the city, but it was as dark as a dark cloud, and with the soul pouring from the two wings of the huge Dyphus and the Chaos Army running rampant, it was impossible to protect all the people. Inevitably, the deaths of innocent people were piling up. The roar of the explosion and the roar of the screaming Chaos Dragons mixed together and pierced the sky soaked with spirit. I will go after Dyphus, you take charge of this. Jean shouted and Baradin nodded. Don't expect too much. You can't save everyone. I will try to weigh it in my own way. As Jean swung his sword to break through the army of chaos, a path immediately opened. The Chaos Dragons were torn apart like shreds by the sword energy that flew in a straight line with lightning in it. Jean ascended the sky, stepping on the falling corpse of the Chaos Dragon and the fragments of the black ship like steps. As I got closer to Dyphus, who kept appearing out of nowhere, more Chaos Dragons flocked in like hungry ghosts. 4 horsemen. Without realizing it, a voice full of evil came out. It wasn't because it was difficult to chase after Deepus without wings, but because the things he was doing were so distant that it was painful to watch. It seemed as if the resentment of the Empire's people dying on the ground was stabbing his back like a horn. Dyphus is one of the people who saved the most people from the chaos that Gleek's death caused throughout the world. In addition, as the 4th horseman of Runkendal, he resisted the evil spirit until the end, sacrificing himself to save the 7th horseman and other resistors, and was a pure knight who never once sought to gain power beyond the family symbol of the sword. Deepus had now committed a massacre so distant that it could never be undone. Rather here. I had to kill him, so that he no longer kills people and destroys the world according to the evil spirit's will. It seemed like my feet kept losing strength as I stepped on the corpse of the Chaos Dragon. Jean continued to steel himself and chase after him. I decided to cut down without hesitation. But I had a strong intuition that I wouldn't be able to catch it right now. It seemed like he had already made all preparations to run away. He dashed. Jin's continuous beam stabs grazed Dyphus's wings. Even if he was hit squarely, it didn't seem like it would cause much damage to him. Dyphus continued to move forward without even looking back, as if he has no intention of fighting right now. Do you think I don't know why you keep running away, 4th horseman? The plan is probably to tie me up like this so the military can easily attack other places. Jean said as he stepped onto the roof of a spire. In the air behind him, the magical ice that had been stepped on in place of the Chaos Dragon's body was connected like a comet. I know very well. Dyphus stopped flying for a moment and looked back. The voice that Jean finally heard was not one that Jean knew. A voice that seems to dig a gloomy hole in your head like the evil spirits or the kings of the Black Sea. Her face was just like roses, with a horn growing in the middle of her forehead and her eyes shining as black as obsidian. Only Greatsword Bolgar seemed to know that he was Deepus. If you know, why do you keep chasing me? I have already been tricked. If I tie you up to the wire, it would be the least damaging option on the ground. If I hadn't chased you, wouldn't you have continued to hit me directly? Just as Dante was the only person who could handle Joshua and his army alone, Jean was the only person who could tie up Deepus now. Yes, that's right. My mother sent me away considering the possibility that you might be in the Empire. It means that you have completely played against your mother's wishes. Look behind you. I don't think there's any need to look. One side of the imperial capital must have been completely destroyed and collapsed. The army of chaos was retreating. Black ships carrying hostages are escaping through black portals that are open like honeycombs in the sky. Jean continued to keep an eye on Deepus. However, have you completely forgotten that I am not someone who just suffers, 4th horseman? This is why your mother still cherishes and loves you. Show me how you plan to beat me up from now on. I'm leaving now too. A portal was forming behind Dyphus' back. teleportation. Ever since he first learned that the evil spirit had such an ability, Jean had been convinced that such instantaneous movement would require a great price. If no price had been required, the war should have already ended with the Temporary Alliance's defeat. Jean still doesn't know exactly what the price is. We can only assume that humans or despair will be used as a medium. Still, one thing was clear. No matter what medium Rosa uses for teleportation, she can never freely use it from the moment she is hit by her true self or double self. Jean saw Deepoos as the clone of the evil spirit. Brother Deepoos shared the power of the evil spirit. It's just not as chaos-enhanced as Joshua or other knights. Of course, Deepoos is naturally a strong warrior. Moreover, since he is fundamentally different from someone like Joshua, he could have become stronger on a whole different level just by going through the same process as him. However, the spirit I felt from Deepoos now was on a level similar to that of Rosa, whom I first encountered when I came to royalty. Therefore, if Deepoos suffers a wound that cannot be easily recovered, it will be no different from Rosa receiving a blow. Jean changed his sword to Bradamanti. Bradamanti? What are you planning to do with your spirit now? Shouldn't I have taken out the Myingwang Rain sword instead? Oh, that's because too many people on the ground will be swept away and die. Dyphus grinned and spread his palms towards the ground. As soul energy condensed in that palm, the air became distorted. Still, it was a bit fun, 12 horsemen. Before I go, I'll give you a gift, so make sure you accept it. If you want revenge, come visit me anytime. I am waiting with a happy heart. The moment Deepoos said that and was about to fire his soul energy to the ground, Jean began to rush in. Deepoos naturally thought that Jean would throw himself towards the ground and not at him. The moment your spirit falls from your hand, at least 10,000 people will disappear from the earth in an instant. So I tried to laugh at it. Now does it matter what happens to innocent people? Are they just so angry that they want to pointlessly swing their swords at themselves? However, when Jean got close to his nose, Deepoos had no choice but to hastily retrieve the soul energy he was about to throw to the ground. I didn't choose Bradamanti to use Reiki. It was because I realized it intuitively. The dim fire that first enveloped Bradamanti was dangerous. Eternalization. Jean has been saving that secret technique for now. It was expected that eternalization would have the power to deal essential damage to the evil god and Deepoos. Deepoos moved his soul energy to the great sword Bolgar and hurriedly intercepted Bradamanti, but the blade stained with eternal flame was already tearing his left wing diagonally and entering his chest. Recovery. The part torn by eternal flower could not be regenerated. The remaining fire in the affected area was impeding recovery. Even though his body was torn apart, Deepoos originally tried to throw his soul energy back to the ground, but was ultimately pushed back by Jin's continued offensive and had no choice but to return straight to the portal. Are you saying that's the extent of the damage to the Empire? Casimir said in a trembling voice. I had just received a report from Jet. Jet also had a hard time believing the numbers in the report. Approximately 30,000 military personnel, including night wizards, died. The number of civilian casualties so far is close to 800,000 and more than 50,000 civilians and nobles were taken prisoner. Jean and his colleagues also checked the report and touched their foreheads. It was only 3 days ago that the Chaos Army led by Dyphus attacked the territory of the Temporary Alliance. In just 3 days, so many innocent people were injured or taken into custody. The numbers written in the report did not feel realistic at all. It was said that we were able to prevent it to a small extent thanks to the technical equipment we provided to Lord Qual Amala not long ago. If that wasn't there, it would have been even more serious, Your Highness. Jet said in a heavy voice. 3 days ago. Dyphus and Joshua were not the only ones who attacked the Magic Federation and Empire with Lutero. Lionel Stam and the unidentified Knights of the Mausoleum were also attacking Ince at the same time. The same was true for Kinzelo's territory, the land of the Beastmen. That side was relatively better thanks to Orgel's response by moving to another dimension through the steel door, but Cole Joe was captured along with more than 5,000 Beastmen. The reason we weren't the only ones attacked is unknown. As Lada said, only Tychon among the allies was not attacked. It might be a ploy to break the solidarity of the Temporary Alliance. Playing Tychon might have been burdensome. Even in the Federation, when they attacked Draka's base, they stayed nearby. If your goal is to massacre and take hostages to create despair, this is not the place. Unlike Tychon, which is a small island nation, the territories of other alliances are very vast. This was the reason why they could not respond properly to the sudden invasion of the evil god. After striking near the main base of Draka, they suddenly appeared in the Milken Kingdom, attacked near the Yukiuka market, and then moved to the other side of the Great Desert of Mitra in an instant. Or maybe they just think of us as the last thing they eat to save us. When Jean opened his mouth, all eyes gathered. Imperial Jeep Kinjalo. The number of prisoners taken from the temporary Allies' lands reached 80,000. Since we the Bamul Alliance also have no choice but to go to Huffister to save them, Rosa might be trying to feed her despair by seeing us suffer at that time. I think so. The spots of despair in the magic map created by Baradin were growing. This does not only apply to areas directly hit by the Army of Chaos. Due to this incident, the fear of the general public, which had been weighing on the world since before Gleek, grew uncontrollably. Refugees were streaming in from all over. There were civilians leaving even the main camp of Draka, which was considered the safest land, so there was no need to worry about other areas. The land they are trying to visit is Tychon. The terrified crowd did not believe the explanation that Tychon was not a safe area at all. If it is as Gongja Jin predicted, the evil spirit and the 4 horsemen will be waiting for us with an inescapable trap. The world order is collapsing. The alliance now had to be shown to the people. The alliance has enough power to oppose the evil spirit. They had to go to Huffister, rescue the captured people, and eliminate the invaders. Otherwise, the fear and despair covering the world will continue to multiply, and it will all be used to complete the evil spirit. Oh, isn't that Zephyrin? Jiffel Sagaju also came. Lada pointed out the window. A steel door was formed in the distant air, and Zephyrin and Baradin came out of it together. They went straight into the conference room. While Baradin had a calm face, as usual, Zephyrin looked very haggard. She had been helping Orgel protect the entire land of the Beastmen, and had just recently scouted the area near Rick Alton and had come to Tychon. As soon as my master regains some of his strength, he treats me like this. You will definitely go to hell when you die, Sir Jean. The Rick Alton reconnaissance was Jin's opinion. Orgel has the greatest mobility among the allies and possesses the knowledge and power to respond to variables, so it was natural for him to take charge of reconnaissance. Why didn't Orgel come himself? You mean that now? You're tired of all the hard work you've been through, so you sent me in your place, right? In the meantime, I took care of Lord Baradin here, so that Zippel's travel time was not wasted, so please feel grateful. Let's do that. When you get back, tell Orgel I'm grateful. When Jean obediently expressed his gratitude, Zephyrin blinked for a moment. I expected him to sarcastically say that it was definitely a burden that we would have to solve together anyway. The sun will rise in the west. Were there any results in the reconnaissance of Rick Alton? Well, just as the Lord expected, all of the captured humans were gathered in Rick Alton. What treatment do prisoners of war experience? It's obvious. Being whipped and taken somewhere. The owner said it seemed like they were being tortured one after the other. Torture? Not all captured prisoners were tortured at the same time. The chaotic troops entered a building dragging at least 30 or as many as 100 people. After a couple of hours, they dragged the next person away. Are we going to increase the level of despair by torturing and killing between 30 and 100 people during that time? I don't know that much. But when Lord Baradin heard this, he seemed to understand something. After Zephyrin finished speaking, Baradin unfolded the map. Perhaps because the remaining energy of the sun god could not be used properly in Tychon, the map was much softer and more unstable than when seen in Draka. Let's all take a look at Rick Alton. Baradin pointed his finger at Rick Alton. Jean, I have continued to observe the map since that day. In particular, I looked at Rick Alton. As everyone can see now, the spots of despair are actually getting smaller. Jean and Baradin naturally expected that the spot of despair in Rick Alton would grow and deepen after the incident. However, what Baradin first confirmed was quite the opposite. Each time the prisoners arrived at Rick Alton, the spots actually became lighter. But this phenomenon changes on a daily basis. It gets smaller for one day and gets bigger again the next day, but the concentration is always thicker than the previous day. Do you understand what this means? It means that after giving hope you are causing despair again. Okay. The Garden of Swords is probably taking in about 30 to 100 prisoners every couple of hours and performing some form of mind manipulation on them. First give hope and then crush it again. In this way we are maximizing the despair that can be gained from captivity. Is Rick Alton the only place of torture identified by Zephyrin Orgel and you? Yes, there were no prisoners going anywhere other than Rick Alton. Even on my map there was no area in particular where the total amount of chaos suddenly increased other than Rick Alton. Although there was an overall increase. It's clearer. The entire alliance must gather troops and go to Rick Carton as quickly as possible. I guess so, but I said to do it as quickly as possible. When are you thinking about? Within 2 days. No, even tomorrow if possible. Baradin and Zephyrin shrugged their shoulders at the same time in response to Jin's answer. 2 days or tomorrow? That's too fast. Don't we need to watch a little more? There is also a need to prepare for traps. Even if it's an obvious and inevitable trap. I think so too, Sir Jin. For now the Army of Chaos has stopped raiding royalties, but we don't know when it will appear again. Of course we cannot predict the period in which the Chaos Army invades INS through large-scale teleportation, so this does not mean we should wait forever. But I think it would be a good idea to watch the situation for at least 15 days. Jin looked at the two people and shook his head. No, the reason the evil spirit stopped its invasion now was confirmed just before you arrived. We weren't idle while you guys were scouting and checking the map. Top floor of Rick Carlton Castle. Elena was sweating profusely as she pressed her hands all over Deepu's upper body, as if forcibly stopping the bleeding. Shit. If you are like this too, what do you expect me to do? The only reason for failure is because of Joshua and that idiot alone. Dyphus snorted at Elena's angry voice. Do not place the blame on me, Prophet. If you had known information about this fire in advance, there would not have been such a setback. Fire. The eternal fire that was attached to Dyphus' body was still not extinguished and was eating away at his body. Elena came here from the Garden of Swords 3 days ago to put it out. Even as Elena, I couldn't put out the fire. Besides, you've been trying in vain for days to put out the fire. Hey Deepu's Runkendal. It is impossible to extinguish this fire immediately unless the head of the family steps in personally. Rosa was currently unable to move as she was absorbing despair. That's it. Fighting with you would only be disrespectful to the head of the family. Anyway, now that the fire is calming down a bit, it will be resolved soon. The invasion has stopped because of this. So be careful next time. The despair that must befall the head of the family has become less than expected. The parasite that clung to my mother is crawling all the way. Do you know that Hister went to the Shoal Empire to check the remaining portals? Elena's eyes widened at Deepu's words. What is that? Hister must have found out why we stopped the invasion and returned. You didn't know that at all. Think carefully about whether you really have the right to criticize Joshua for being incompetent. How did you know that Hister went there? You're saying something stupid again. Do you have to check to know if a mosquito has bitten your back? I am part of my mother. And Hufester's marriage is entirely composed of his mother's power. The power that Deepu's received from Rosa easily exceeded Elena's expectations. Why would you give it to me? Why would you give it to the 4 horsemen? Still Runkendal's bloodline takes priority? Now you come. Deepu sneered as if he could clearly see Elena's true intentions. When will I be able to shake off that arrogance? You and Joshua have a lot in common. All I have is a background full of greed, and I get agitated whenever things don't go as planned. Am I really funny after receiving strength from the matriarch? It's funny. You are still thinking about resurrecting Hilurum through your mother. You fear your mother, but you are not loyal to her. Your loyalty still lies with Hilurum. Yes. Think however you want. But the Prophet. Hilurum will never wake up. Do you really think your mother wants the end of the world? In the end, it's just something that inevitably happens in the process of the matriarch being reborn as a perfect evil spirit. Elena's eyes widened. Does this mean that the matriarch is not planning to attain full godhood? Okay. If Runkindle's name is not to be lost, it needs people to remember and revere it. A world full of ashes and dust is not worth ruling over. You will believe that your mother's instincts will eventually want to end the evil spirit, but if you continue to do so, you will soon end up like Joshua. Slowly Deepu stood up from his seat. The eternal flame attached to his upper body was still not extinguished. If you understand, stop wasting your time holding on to a fire you can't handle and go do your job. The youngest will be here soon. That guy never misses an opportunity. The fact that we paused our invasion because of the fire you lit cannot be an opportunity for the 12 horsemen. Even if they come to attack here, we will still have an overwhelming advantage. It's getting frustrating now. This is why you and Joshua always get bullied by the youngest. Now is a bigger crisis than ever. Because my mother cannot move and the fire that has been lit in me is likely not to be extinguished until the youngest comes. This means that if a battle breaks out, I may be pushed aside by the youngest. You could lose? Okay, so we have to make a plan. Even if I lose, Runkindle will not lose. Jean shared information about Valeria with Baradin and Zephyrin. So the reason the Garden of Swords has stopped its invasion of royalties is because you dealt a blow to the 4 horsemen? Hester confirmed this by reading the records of the portal left in the Shoal Empire. Okay. So far, the main forces of the Garden of Swords have been shown to revive quickly even after death, but the 4th horseman suffered an injury that could not be recovered for more than a few days. This is quite a special story. The regenerative power they have must come from their evil spirits, so is there something wrong? Whether there is a problem or not, it is almost certain that the evil spirit will not be able to recover the 4th horseman right away. I understand why Sir Jean insisted on moving so quickly. Jean nodded at Baradin and Zephyrin's words. 1 o'clock is urgent. Once the 4th horseman recovers, the Ince invasion through large-scale teleportation will begin again. All forces except our Tychon have already been hit hard by it and have not been able to respond properly. The only reason we didn't get hit was because they didn't invade. If we are invaded a few more times like this, King Ince may be over before we have a final battle with the evil god. So in this counterattack, we need to not only rescue prisoners but also find a way to suppress their large-scale teleportation in the future? That's correct, Baradin. If we don't find it this time, there is no future. We will have to mobilize troops for what could be called a semi-all-out war. In any case, each power's fleet power is essential to bring back the rescued prisoners. In fact, it will be a rehearsal for the final battle with the evil spirit. Not only the troops but also special engineers and researchers will have to go with us to find clues about mass teleportation. In Jeep, the best researchers in the Mage Tower and Baradin Kingelo had already been captured by Koljoso, Buvar and Orgel, and in Tychon people like Valeria and Qualatri had to go directly to the front line. How about setting it for early morning 2 days later? I think that would be a good time for me too. One of the Temporary Alliance's greatest strengths is my master, and he needs to rest for at least that much time before he can show his power worthy of his reputation. They're still exhausted, so they sent me to the meeting instead. Jean nodded. All that remained now was to decide on the details of the operation and hope that Deepu would not recover within 2 days. Near the lead on the deck of the Adolescent in the early morning of May 22, 1803. The time for counterattack has arrived. Valeria had been looking into the portals of the Shoal Empire, but fortunately there was no record of the portals of chaos opening again. Look, what did I say? I said your fire was special. Even now that guy named Dyphus is probably suffering from terrible pain. Bale said. Jean thought about how to respond to this tactless former teenage knight and just closed his mouth. Mary must have heard Vale's voice too. Mary did not react differently to Vale's words and did not take her eyes off the other side of the dark sky. Tychon's participants were currently waiting for Orgel aboard the Mary and Cosmos fleets. It was decided to move at once through his steel gate to the center of Rick Alton and the nearby Hupister territorial waters. The youngest. Please speak, sister. I'm just saying this just in case. Don't have any complacent thoughts about trying to save Brother Deepu at all costs. Unlike Runtia, my brother has already killed too many people. Even if it wasn't my brother's will. Yes. Jean also had the same thought. At first I wanted to somehow save Deepus like Runtia, but now there was no hope. Above all, the current Defuse is not an opponent that can be relaxed. If you deal with him with a half-hearted attitude, you and your comrades on board this ship will die. Just like when they went to the Sword Emperor Temple to save Dante, the Bamul Alliance had mobilized almost all of its power. Starting with the survivors of Runkendal, including the brothers Mary and Tawna, major figures who were always on standby at Tychon, as well as large-scale forces from the Nameless and Bigung empires participated in the war. In fact, all but Casimir and the king's direct garrison were heading to the battlefield. Ugh, Confucius. Tychon won't be attacked as soon as we get to Rick Alton, right? I left a red owl for just such a time, Enya. Just now, Valeria, read the records of the portal. Quicantel answered Enya's question. I'm still worried. Especially Yuria. It'll be okay, right? I feel so bad wondering what if she breaks down while we're away. The king has to constantly wait for the situation, so he won't have the energy to take care of Yuria, and Master isn't the kind of person who is good at appeasing others. Beres has often been shown to play surprisingly well with Yuria. There's also Pinti and Co. So don't worry too much and just think about us completing the operation safely and returning. Yes, Enya. Don't forget that you are the head of the Tychon wizardry. If you can't concentrate, your subordinates will become more anxious. Crashing Alyssa checked her gauntlets and ruffled Enya's hair. Ugh, I understand. Garrison Commander. You may not have many good memories of the Empire, but most of the people of the Empire who were captured by Rick Alton were as helpless and weak as you were back then. So let's save them and send them back to normal life. Hey, do you really think it would be awkward for me to save the people of the Empire? I was just worried about the garrison commander's daughter. I'm sorry if you see me like that. Even if there are nobles among the prisoners who harassed me, it doesn't matter. Thanks to Confucius, Jean, everything has already been overcome. That's just what I said, cutie. I know best that our Enya is good. Okay. Among those captured there will definitely be members of my official fan club and your unofficial fan club mixed in. We are the president, so we have to save him. Stop talking strangely, Miss Sandra. You must not call me by my real name in the presence of our members. You must call me Nodev Sarsing, okay? So as not to damage my sense of mystery. Whoa. Anyway, Orgel is late. I guess the operation has already suffered a setback. Bacchus said, looking at his pocket watch. 3:07 a.m. It was only 7 minutes late, but I was getting impatient as the scale of the operation was large. Unlike Tychon, who used Orgel's portal, Zippel and Kinzelo's fleet was flying directly to Rick Alton. When Ziffel's fleet, with Imperial forces aboard, reaches the northern border of Rickarlton, and Kinzelo's fleet, with Bigung and Nameless on board this side, reaches the west, Orgel directs Tychon's forces to the center of Rickarlton, and it was decided to divide it into territorial waters and move it. Click, click, clang. As the scheduled time continued to be delayed, waves colored in the night sky were crashing against the fleet. As 30 minutes passed and the entire fleet's anxiety grew, a huge steel door was finally seen forming in the air. Orgel! Orgel, who came out of the steel door, already looked quite tired. I guess everyone was worried because it was late. There was no problem with the operation. Rather, good news occurred. Good news? When Jean asked, Orgel nodded. I didn't have a good feeling, so I went to scout first, but in the process the evil spirit's energy ran wild once. The reason for the delay is that the remaining allies waited for the aftermath to calm down before entering. How is that good news? That rampage is like the sleep-talking of an evil spirit. Now, for some reason, the evil spirit is probably in a situation where it is unable to move due to despair, and it momentarily flinches at the external stimulus of an intrusion. This means that the possibility of the evil spirit directly appearing in this battle has become very low. Before the temporary alliance began its operation, the thing they were most concerned about was the participation of evil spirits. Of course, it cannot be ruled out that the state of the evil spirit changes while carrying out the operation in Rick Alton. However, since it has already caused a runaway once, it will take some time for the evil spirits to normalize, so I don't think there is much to worry about. Unless you're going to fight in Rick Alton for a few days. As Orgel said, if Rosa did not participate directly, the success rate of the operation was bound to increase significantly. Dyphus received some of the powers of the evil god and gained transcendental strength, but he was injured due to eternalization. Even if he was in perfect condition, no one thought that he alone could handle the highest level of the Temporary Alliance's forces. Of course, in addition to Dyphus, there are strong people like Paidler and Lionel and the Chaos Army, but as long as there are no evil spirits, they don't seem to be pushed back. Slowly, the steel door began to descend. The steel gate reached the sea surface and was divided into two. One side led to the Hupister Sea, where Cosmos and other prisoner rescue teams were headed, and the other side led to the center of Rickalton, where the Puberty ship was located. Cosmos, come to your senses. Don't worry, Captain Mary. This Cosmos fleet has no history of capture. So just worry about the captain. Your wounds haven't fully recovered yet. My lord, I will come back. I can't believe I'm guarding these pirates, Bacchus and Bale said. The two men were responsible for escorting the Cosmos fleet from the sea until it safely landed in Rickalton, then joining the main force. These are not pirates, but the most important personnel for transporting prisoners. Protect a single ship from being destroyed until the Allies clear the way to Rickalton Harbor. Tshi knew. And join us safely. You and Lord Bacchus. The Puberty turned its bow to the right. Words of good luck were exchanged for a while, and the ships moved forward toward their respective doors. 4:15 a.m., north border of Rickalton. About an hour has passed since the Temporary Alliance's operation began in earnest. Zippel's fleet broke through the anti-aircraft network and entered smoothly. Although it was unable to reveal its might during the general offensive due to being attacked by Ram, Zippel's fleet was in name and reality the greatest military force of mankind. The Chaos Dragon and the Black Ship that were constantly rushing at each other were simply oxidized to ashes like moths touched by a fire. To break through the fleet defense shield, a transcendent strongman like Paddler was needed. Is it because, as Orgel said, there was a rampage of evil spirits? It seems like Runkendal is just trying to buy time by wasting its troops, Baradin said, unfolding the map with magic. There has been no significant change in Rickalton's desperate situation as of yet. Dante Hiron, what do you think? Do you think they are buying time or setting a trap? Dante turned his head and looked at Baradin. Normally Dante would have been lost in thought for a moment while looking at Baradin's unfamiliar appearance, but that was not the case now. I think it's the latter. It's just a feeling, though. So do I. If things continue like this, we will reach the first POW camp that Orgel and Zephyrin found out about within 30 minutes, but have they already moved the prisoners? How about we speed it up and check? Even if it is a trap anyway, we must advance to Rickalton Castle beyond the POW camp. The mission that we and Jeeple are assigned to is to rescue the prisoners from Camp 1 and 2, and then support the Jean and Bamul alliance. Well, if all goes according to plan, Jean and Tychon's forces will have slowly entered the center of Rickalton. It would be better to follow your opinion. It's also a situation where you can't slowly observe and respond to any type of trap. Above all, if it is not a trap, it is an opportunity, as it means that the fourth horseman is continuing to focus on recovery. When Baradin gave the order, the fleet increased its speed. Keek Quaduk. The fragments of the Black Ship smashing against the shield and the corpse of the Chaos Dragon constantly obscured the view. About 10 minutes later, Jeep's fleet was able to confirm the first POW camp hidden behind the Chaos Barrier. Now the number of charging Chaos Dragons and Black Ships had decreased significantly, so much so that they were not even a threat. I wonder if the reason the prison has such a bizarre appearance is the will of the evil spirit or the personal preference of the four horsemen. I'll have to ask when I see him. The interior scene from above was a completely different sight from a typical concentration camp. First of all, there was a huge tree like a castle in the inner center of the wall. The tree was full of translucent black fruits, and each fruit seemed to contain about 50 prisoners. Giant-shaped monsters were also seen picking fruits one by one, and they did not react differently when they saw the fleet appear. The only ones who reacted strongly to the fleet were the prisoners inside the fruit. No voices were heard, but as soon as the prisoners saw the fleet, they frantically pounded and scratched the inside of the fruit with their fists. So because of the flowing blood, the fruit turned red in an instant. Baradin looked down at the scene and was not impressed while Dante clenched his fists. Many of them were prisoners of the Empire. Well, that's strange too. As soon as we reach here, Rickleton's despair suddenly deepens. Dante Huron. Originally, it should have been the opposite. The feeling that the people who were trapped in the fruit felt when they saw Jeep's fleet would be alive. However, the despair shown on the map continued to deepen, and Dante suppressed his boiling anger and looked at the ground again. As I raised my senses, I felt like I could gradually hear the voices of the people trapped in the fruit. "You can't come. Don't come." It was too faint to be sure if the prisoners were really speaking, but their body language was clearly visible. The prisoners were not only beating or scratching the fruit, but they were also waving their hands wildly, as if telling them to go back quickly. I understand why the despair has deepened. The fourth horseman told the prisoners here in advance that if we came we would fall into a trap. Or brainwashed. It was the latter. The prophet manipulated the minds of the prisoners in camp number 1 to create the perception that even if the Temporary Alliance's rescue team came here, it would be useless. The Temporary Alliance will fall into a trap as soon as it comes here and die before your eyes. Awareness of such content. Sagaju. It's a magical power reaction. Magical energy is spreading from the camp. A wizard shouted. If it was a ship, I naturally thought that the energy of chaos or an army would attack the fleet, but magical power was suddenly spreading across the fleet. Deploy the shield to its maximum extent. Fortunately, the fleet strengthened its shield faster than the magical energy spreading from the camp was converted into magic. Net. The magic power that surged from the camp became a net so large that it encompassed the entire fleet, but in itself it was not a threat at all. The net attached to the shield did not have a strong enough deterrent to limit the movement of the fleet. Hongi in the form of a storm is coming. It's not at a level that can't be blocked with a shield. As reported by the wizards on board, a storm hit the fleet. The fleet stumbled a little, but like the magic net, it was not strong enough to break through the shield. What do magical power and this ambiguous spirit mean? As the concentration of despair in the map continued to thicken, Baradin raised his head as if he realized something. Sagaju is fully capable of breaking through. Please give me orders. No, the entire fleet stands by. This is illusion magic. Illusion magic? Dante asked, looking at Baradin. Okay, I didn't expect to see Lost Dark World illusion magic here. Everyone listen carefully. In the eyes of the prisoners now it will appear that we have been cruelly annihilated. That is why despair levels are rising even though we are fine. It was accurate. Now the captives were seeing the illusion that everything had gone according to the prophet's plan. In their eyes, the entire fleet has already exploded and crashed. Then why don't we just go through the rest of our marriage and show that we're okay? Lord Baradin. It's not that simple, Dante. If you solve it that way, you cannot destroy the illusion that dominated the minds of the prisoners. Even if we save them all and tell them they're okay, the prisoners will remain trapped in the illusion. Then the despair will continue to grow. Right? What should I do? Rather than distorting the magic with greater power, we must dispel the spell. The net that covered the fleet. This means that the wizards must unravel it one by one. Is that the only way? I don't know much about magic, but I think that would take too much time. That's right, it will take at least 3 hours. If you want to shorten the time, just kill all the prisoners. The dead prisoners will be released from their illusions, so there will be no further despair. That is unacceptable. I thought you would say that. But this is a trap, just as we predicted all along. The intention is also very obvious. I'm trying to buy time. To delay our entry. Is probably because of the fourth rider's own injury. There was no information that he had recovered until right before the operation began. In other words, does this mean that it is a choice between rescuing the prisoners and moving as the fourth horseman intended? Or sacrificing the prisoners to reach the fourth horseman a few hours faster? That's right. So I told him to stop for now, but I was actually worried. It might be better to kill the prisoners and move on. To get rid of Disphus. They said it was unacceptable to kill the prisoners with our own hands. So you two please provide some evidence. The basis for why we have to play into Disphus's trap even though we know it. Dante glares at Baradin. Dante soon regained his composure and answered, I am the protector of individuals and empires and the successor of the Emperor of Swords. I'm embarrassed to say it with my own mouth, but I can say that he is a very special person. I have a feeling what you're going to say. I'm starting to get a little carried away, so keep going. After Jean first guessed why the evil spirit uses Joshua, Orgel said that the despair of a special being would have a strong influence on the evil spirit's completion. So it is possible that my despair is the same. So if you kill the captives like this and move on, my despair will become too great. Baradin blinked his eyes a few times while looking at Dante and answered, "Okay, I'll accept it. That makes sense." All wizards in the fleet are now quickly preparing to cancel the spell. All unit leaders and highest-ranking wizards should gather at the flagship. I will show you a demonstration. While the wizards were gathering, Baradin gathered the researchers within Kojak. You will have nothing to do while the Dante spell is lifted. So take the researchers and go outside. There might be an attack when you cancel the spell. Maybe so, but is it really necessary to use illusion magic to buy time? Above all, we need to somehow find clues about mass teleportation. Since we're stranded, it's better to divide the number of people and do something. We need to find not only clues about the teleportation but also other detention centers. I understand. I will give you a signal when the welcome is over so you can rejoin us then. If, as you said, there is an attack during the process and we are torn apart, let's meet at the destination. At the same time, the western border of Rickalton. What blocked Kingelo was actual troops. Arch, there are many enemies. Where did it suddenly come out like that? I couldn't see anything until just now. Bianca and Ranka said. The dark and empty sky ahead was suddenly filled with an army of chaos like a swarm of bees. It was hard to even guess how many ships and chaos dragons there were. It was the same not only at the front but also at the sides and rear. It must be a large-scale teleportation or an ambush using illusion magic. Probably the latter. The portal was not observed to open. It was as Zephyrin expected. The army of chaos had been building a siege line ever since Kingelo entered Rickalton. However, the siege line was too wide and even the vision was deceived with illusion magic, so they were not noticed. The executive's eyes focused on Zephyrin. Since Orgel had not yet returned to the fleet, the decision was up to Zephyrin. We will respond with the goal of total annihilation, not just penetration to the target area. Anyway, this is the land of evil spirits, so if you leave behind any remnants you will meet them again. Get ready for battle across the fleet. The gathering may be delayed, but no one in the Alliance would have expected this level of variation. I understand, Zephyrin. Lord Owl. Zephyrin made eye contact with Owl. I think it would be better for the unknown and the Queen to go to the ground. One side discovers the camp and secures information on large-scale teleportation, and the other side rescues Cold Joe. Especially now, there is a high possibility that Mr. Cho will be taken out when the enemies surrounding us are pushed back. I know what you mean. For Kingelo, Sir Cho is someone who must be rescued. Of course, if the worst happens, you will have no choice but to give up, but it would be good if you took care to prevent that from happening. And Lord Barak. Speak, Grand Duke Zephyrin. It would be a good idea for you to participate in rescuing Joe with these people. Barak wanted to scream, asking me to save that guy, but he barely managed to close his throat. I understand. I know that Lord Barak usually detests Lord Joe, but he is still the most important person to our cause. I hope you don't mess up your work because of your emotions. Part of our secret palace is missing, so we will infiltrate to our destination first. Owl, I think we need to recruit more people from the unknown. Cirrus, who was listening, opened her mouth. I agree with Acting Chief Bigungju's opinion. When Jean is in danger, there is no better solution than a snow toad. Zephyrin nodded. Please do so. Southern waters of Rickalton. The Cosmos fleet safely escaped through the Steel Gate and lined up at sea. Well, since the transportation gateways around the world have been closed, even worse transportation techniques have emerged. They said that if the spatial movement used in the Red Owl is mass-produced, the Black Prince will share the benefits with us. I hope it gets developed quickly, Cosmos said, looking at the disappearing steel door. It's noisy, you pirate. And it would be Mary Runkendall, not you, who would share Jin's technology. Hehe, our teenage knight is angry again. Let's not do that and get along well. To save people, our hands and feet must work well together. Pirate King Cosmos surprisingly treated the Veil as skillfully as if he were a young boy. Although Veil grumbled, he didn't truly hate Cosmos. Cosmos, I think Lord Bale became sensitive because he felt a certain energy as soon as he came here. Bacchus spoke in a low voice and looked at Bale. He was feeling the dark brain energy unique to Paidler Runkendall transmitted from the distant land. Of course Bale is aware of this more clearly than Bacchus. I never thought he would be waiting for me as soon as I arrived. Didn't that bastard betray Orgel? It looks like they knew in advance that we were going this way. That won't be it. The sea entry route is limited anyway, so they must have deployed their forces in advance. Normally Bale would have been so excited that he would have thought of quickly finishing off Paidler. But now there were too many things to protect. It is not a situation where we can rule out that there is another enemy besides Paidler. Humph, when we first met I couldn't use much strength at sea. This is territory now. You snake-like bastard, but let me tell you that they are of a different class. Bacchus, you take a detour while protecting these things here. First of all, it would be better for me to go alone. If a problem arises, fire a flare immediately. I understand. Cheer up, teenage knight. And don't worry too much about us because we already had a history of running away from the evil god's army last time. This is the immortal Cosmos fleet. Veil's golden wings began to split the dark sky. Those remaining in the fleet turned their bows to look behind them. Meanwhile Jean and his group, who had come out of the steel door on the right, were suddenly faced with darkness. It's a strange darkness, isn't it? You can only see the people next to you and nothing else. This is the center of Rick Alton? Sandra said, holding Jin's shoulder, and Hito grabbed her hand and pulled her away. It seems like a subspace miss. You don't know where something might suddenly pop out, so you shouldn't restrict your colleagues' movements. As Hito said, as soon as the colleagues recognized the darkness, they kept an appropriate distance and were on guard in all directions. I haven't heard anything like this from Orgel. It seems like something changed while he was opening the portal. Jean said so and wrapped his spirit around Bradamanti. And as soon as he cut through the darkness of subspace as usual, Jean was able to immediately realize that this place was not made of one layer and that space reacted to attacks. Shag pull dash. As soon as one layer of darkness was cut, alls of chaos poured out from all directions. Because the party's military power was so high, it was not threatening, but if it continued to repeat itself, the story would change. As a test, I cut into the subspace a few more times, and each time the all came out. It feels like the characteristics of boundary magic have been added to subspace. I think the reason they pulled a prank like this was to buy time. The all was only responding to Jin's spiritual sword. It was possible to pierce each layer with attacks other than the spirit sword, but there was an indescribable difference in efficiency. Even if Hito truly demonstrates his mastery of kendo, it is hard to see him getting a clean cut. The difference came not from the size of the power, but from the special nature of spiritual energy. If it weren't for the spiritual sword, it would take a year just to break through. Everyone please stay away. Please pay special attention to protecting non-combat forces like Qual. I understand, my lord. I understand, master. At Jin's words, the group widened their distance. And when I swung the sword, the all seemed to fall only near Jean. Brother Deepu's, is the situation not so good that we need to buy time like this? Moreover, Rosa is unable to move. Normally Jean would have chosen to move forward while taking time to adjust more variables. But now it was necessary to break through quickly. Each time that was delayed here, the number of prisoners that could be saved would decrease and Deepu's could recover. Even if we assume that Deepu's has already fully recovered and is simply using this subspace as a means to confuse the party, breaking through was the only means. We will break through quickly. As for the rest, please keep a certain distance and follow me, so that the all doesn't touch me, but make sure you don't miss me. I understand. If they are trying to buy time for recovery, they will definitely try to tear us apart at some point. They must have created a subspace because they felt burdened dealing with us alone. Even if you and I split up at that time, we must never separate from the people we agreed upon in advance. Anyway, the group that entered the center of Rickalton planned to disperse at a certain point even if there were no traps like this. Valeria and Qual must find clues to teleportation while the others must rescue the prisoners. The only ones scheduled to fight Deepu's directly were Jean and Hito. However, Jin decided to send Hito to Qual's side. Lord Hito, please protect Qual should he inevitably be torn apart from me. I think it will be safe if Lord Hito takes charge of Qual until someone like Vale or Orgel comes to help. I get it. Jean began to move forward, cutting through subspace. Countless awls were thrown, but none of them even touched the hem of Jin's clothes. By the time Jean had cut through about 300 layers of subspace, he had the feeling that he was slowly approaching the end. The repulsive force transmitted from beyond subspace was rapidly weakening. Let's cut off the last layer soon. Suddenly, the eerie darkness cleared away to reveal Rick-Carlton Castle standing tall like a black volcano. Around it I saw black trees rising as gigantic as Rickalton Castle. It was the very tree that Jeep and Empire had identified on the northern border. In addition, as soon as the group exited subspace, the tree was shaking like crazy, shaking off the fruit the prisoners were trapped in all directions. No matter how Jean you are, you can't help but feel embarrassed for a moment when you see that horrible sight. Colleagues! I need to check on my colleagues. Since he was Jean, he took a deep breath and immediately looked back at his colleagues who were following him. The veil of spirit forming a subspace separated Jean from his comrades. Of course, if the subspace traps the comrades, all you have to do is cut them down again with the spirit sword. But Jean couldn't swing the spiritual sword in that direction. This was because a large sword was falling on Jin's head like a thunderbolt. Welcome, youngest. It was Bolgar, the great sword of Dyphus. Bolgar and Bradamanti clashed, leaving a black half-moon in the air. Black spirit rose up like lava from the ground, cracked by the shock wave that spread around the two people. Jean gritted his teeth and looked up at Dyphus. Sharp horns, black eyes that could never be called human, and even a smile that seemed to enjoy this terrible situation. The second older brother he knew could not be found anywhere. It was already like that when we met in the Empire, but now that fact is even more painful. 'Cause I had to finish him off today. For horsemen, the sword is lighter than I feared. Jin's eyes landed on Deepu's left wing and chest. Even though the clothes were covering it, I could still feel the fire remaining inside. This is the result of being careless against you last time in the Empire. So I have prepared a lot. Behind Deepu's back, the fruit containing the prisoners was falling continuously. Each fruit is trapped with 50 people in it. This meant that every time one fruit plummeted to the ground, at least dozens of people would be killed or injured. Let's enjoy it slowly, youngest. There may still be Dyphus left inside that monster. But Jean decided to rule out that thought. As Mary said, if you deal with it with a clumsy mind, the situation will only become more dire. Even if there are injuries from eternal fire, the fourth horseman is still a transcendent powerhouse. We must fight calmly even for our brother. There was murderous intent in Jin's eyes. Let's see if you can take that kind of leisure even when the fight is over, fourth horseman. No. You're the monster that swallowed your brother. You can barely hide your pain the whole time, and you know how to say such scary things. Chi-dash. The two swords that had stopped interlocking began to move again. Jean pushed Dyphus away and unleashed a lightning thrust while Dyphus flew backwards and swung Bolgar. A black sword so large that vision disappeared in an instant was striking the ground. Jean blocked Deepu's sword energy and rushed forward to prevent him from further increasing the distance. There was no time to get out the colleagues trapped in subspace. However, even if it wasn't a spirit sword, people like Hito could cut through subspace, so they would escape over time. I must tie up Dyphus completely, so that I can focus on rescuing the prisoners when my comrades escape subspace. To do this, we had to first solve Deepu's mobility. Only by cutting off its wings could it be mortally wounded with eternal fire. Eternal fire cannot erupt in the form of sword energy, so the fight must somehow lead to close combat. You keep fighting as if you're running away. Even though you share the power of the evil spirit, you don't have the confidence to stand up to me head-on? I told you, let's enjoy it slowly. One side will definitely end today anyway, so don't worry. Jean, who was chasing Dyphus, kept seeing prisoners in his field of vision. Some of the fruits were already full of corpses, and in some of the fruits the survivors were frantically screaming for help. If Deepoos took them hostage and started threatening them, Jean had no way to stop them. Not even the fourth horseman can take hostages carelessly. He must be conscious of the fact that the moment he starts killing prisoners there will be no restrictions on me and my allies. If they had planned to consume the prisoners that way from the beginning, it would have turned out that way from the beginning. So why is Deepoos neglecting the prisoners like this? It is not something that is hidden somewhere, nor is it maintained in a state where it can be easily used as a hostage in case of emergency. Rather, the fruits that the prisoners were imprisoned in were being randomly scattered near Rickalton Castle, as if telling them to hurry up and pick them up one by one. As he thought about it, Jean got the feeling that Deepoos was arranging the prisoners rather than leaving them unattended. What is this arrangement for? Sigh dash. Deepoos' sword energy brushed Jin's cheek. Like Rosa, his sword had the power to spread chaos, so his light heart throbbed and pushed away that energy. At the same time, Deepoos burst a nearby fruit and made eye contact with Jean. The people trapped inside along with the fragments of the fruit were shattered into pieces and scattered somewhere. You can't keep focusing on other things while putting me in front of you. If you want all the prisoners to explode and run away like that, you can keep doing that. Dyphus could not finish his sentence. This was because Jean suddenly rushed in and cut off his left wing. Deepoos was unable to dodge Jin's sword, which suddenly became faster than the perceived speed while being chased. If they had been engaged in close combat on the ground, Dyphus would not have been attacked like this, because the sword would have reacted before the head. However, no matter how fast it is, there are many restrictions on movement, and it is only recently that Deepoos gained the ability to fly. Jean has deliberately adjusted the speed to avoid these minor mistakes, as if they were barely keeping up. Of course, it was not a situation where the distance could be narrowed at once whenever one wanted to. I just used the one move I saved. You guys stop talking nonsense. Are you going to threaten me with a hostage? Do whatever you want, let's see who gets there first. Do you think we came to Rickalton without that much preparation? In fact, the final agreement between the allies in the operation was to eliminate at least Dyphus, even if the worst-case scenario came and all hostages were killed. Okay. As expected, you are good at lying and cheating. However, just because of a group of hostages, he pulled out a hidden move. Deepoos' left wing began to regenerate. It wasn't that there was no damage at all. Just before the blade touched down, Bradamante was momentarily immersed in eternal flame. However, unlike when it was cut in the Empire, the energy of eternalization did not penetrate deep. This was because it was opened quickly and the cut was shallower than before. Your choice just revealed that you will need a minimum amount of time to fully utilize the fire. I will respond more cautiously. So come to your senses, youngest child. If you want to win, such a human heart cannot destroy me and my mother. That remains to be seen. But the people who talk to me like that are all in the other world. Do you think you and the evil spirit will face different results? Deepoos was increasing the distance again. The flight appears to be noticeably slower than before due to the everlasting flower attached to the left wing. However, as the number of checks increased, pursuit was still not easy. For some reason, as the chase progressed, the two people were slowly moving away from Rickalton Castle. As soon as he reached the Black Forest engulfed in soulfulness, Jean realized that there were not many fruit-holding captives nearby. Now is the right time to rescue the prisoners. It seems that the comrades have slowly escaped from subspace, but is the Alliance's fleet still there? At that moment, a huge energy was felt from the direction of Rickalton Castle. It was Hito. He and his companions finally escaped through subspace to Rickalton Castle. As soon as Jean checked his energy, he set off an orange flare. It was a signal that he was safe and that he should rescue the prisoners first. Dyphus immediately recognized the meaning of the flare. This was because even though the sky was colored with orange light for a moment, I could not sense anyone else approaching this way at all. It seems you took lightly my advice to come to your senses. Wouldn't it be better to give up the prisoners and attack me with my comrades? It's not for you to judge. The biggest reason why Dyphus continued to lure Jean away from Rickalton Castle was Hito and his colleagues. In his current state, he believed that Jean and all of them could not handle the combined effort alone. Although Jean was vaguely aware of Deepu's intentions, moving away from Rick Alton was not a bad choice for Jean either, because we were able to avoid a situation where Deepus threatened the prisoners with their lives. Above all, Jean was confident that he would not lose even if he had to fight Deepus one-on-one. Even if he hides a lot of power. I thought you would answer that way. You probably came here even though you knew it was a trap in the first place. Anyway, this should be enough. Suddenly Deepus stopped flying. Black trees towering like pillars were blocking Jean and Dyfus. I would like to ask you one last question. You, the youngest, the comrades and prisoners you brought with you. Which of the two do you want to survive and return to Tychon safely? It's getting frustrating now. This is why you and Joshua always get bullied by the youngest. Now is a bigger crisis than ever. Because my mother cannot move and the fire that has been lit in me is likely not to be extinguished until the youngest comes. This means that if a battle breaks out, I may be pushed aside by the youngest. You could lose? Okay, so we have to make a plan. Even if I lose, Runkendal will not lose. A conversation between Elena and Defuse before the operation began. The version that Dyfus had planned back then has just been completed. Wawaya. The black trees scattered into particles and the entire area was instantly enveloped in black fog. Even if a sword wind was generated, the fog did not disperse. I don't think it's subspace. What? Although he could not see Deepu's appearance with his eyes, Jean did not miss his energy and aimed his sword at him. After a while, I suddenly saw the fog clearing. And as he checked his surroundings, Jean realized that he was not in the center of Rick Alton. Even when I looked back, I couldn't see Rick Alton Castle or the trees that held the prisoners. Teleportation? Could it be that the fog was a portal? It was accurate. Dyfus had just used the power of the evil spirit to open a portal and teleport. He had his feet on the ground, not in the air. The left wing that had been cut by Jean earlier and had been regenerated was seen falling to the ground. It seems difficult to answer, but no matter which one you want to save more, you can't go save them now. This place is quite far from Rick Alton Castle. As Dyfus said this, he raised his greatsword Bolgar.